anxiety, and all the other emotions that we have. And then comes our earth with its living and non living matter. With this earth comes a timeline where we have evolved, or basically, the earth has evolved for more than 4.5 billion years, and humans have been just into the fraction of this timeline. That was the story about evolution of earth. And in today's time, we find its relevance with the arrival of pandemic and all the situations that we are going through personally and as a global citizens as well. So with earth, it has its own ecosystem of birds, animals, and humans, and Earth has designed them, or if I may use the word creation, that Earth has created all the living beings with its own ecosystem very closely linked to each other. Whereas in today's scenario, we see a little or a major reversal in how we perceive this creation, where the humans take in the foremost position, taking in consideration animals and birds into just mere non living matter, where the thought process is to find an equilibrium of our need and our wants, where our thoughts, our actions, and words matter because our body is linked through all these emotions, the words that we speak, and which get translated into action. And hence, we can differentiate between what do we exactly need and want, and if we can take what is required and leave it for the rest, because nature has an abundance for all of us. And that's the reason we all are surviving in our own corners of the world. Today, I'll be speaking about my learning journey, which is majorly about questions and experiences that I had as an architecture student, and I still have as a permaculture designer and a mindfulness facilitator. A journey from year 2011 when I started my college in architecture to recently 2020 when I did a mindfulness facilitation course. Basically, the difference or the journey is about from routine to a rhythm. As an architecture student, way back in 2011, the reason I chose architecture was about how I can learn something new every day and have challenges and find solutions to those challenges. And I saw architecture as a very creative field of applying all of these processes to create new solutions which are individualistic to each of us. So the first question was how I can learn something new every day. And here is the process of architecture where we take in brief from the client and we take in a brief from the client or for basically understanding what are our needs, what are the client needs, and how we can uh, suggest a solution to all those needs of a client. And more often these needs are about wants. So with this client brief, what we go further is about site analysis, the climate study, literature reviews, case studies, um, abiding to specific standards and bylaws uh, which are specific to locations, the context. Different countries, different cities, different places have their own bylaws, their own policies, and yes, of course, sustainable features. So with this in background, we conduct usually a literature case study to understand the thought process behind a design project, and when if and to find a live case study wherein we visit and study a live project which may be built or designed based on about all the research that is being done in the in this part of the design. And then we head on to inferences where there's detail area programming, where we speak about how each of these needs have a specific requirement, and those requirements are met to be by the land, by the area of the land. So how do I translate these needs to the land, in terms of areas, defining each element of the design. um, and this design is of course based on a concept, and concept is the core of any design. So if the concept is clear, the design gets translated into the land. Hence, further develop a form to the building, having our own create. This is where the creativity comes into play, where we take in all the information that we have gained through research and inferences and the area programming to develop a form which matches the concept to create something as a solution to the client brief. And if everything goes well, we go ahead for a detailed design and a final design. This is, in short, a flowchart for all the design process that we follow as architecture students in our college lifetime. And this is just till the stage of design. The actual construction or the actual action on the land is a completely different process. So I'd like to talk to you about how the journey of questions began for me. And while I was in my thesis year, I chose I observed that buildings, there was a building and there was surrounding, but I noticed that it felt a little not so connected, because there's a building, tall building standing in the middle of the land, and the landscape and the surroundings is right there, on the earth, and there was no interaction inside or outside. So are we as humans or the users who are going to use this building for any purpose had no connection with their surrounding. And so did I feel that if the users wouldn't feel this connection, they might, and since our environment is an extension of who we are, so this this disconnect was a little disturbing for me. So I thought maybe bringing the landscape into the interior of any building would give a clear picture, or maybe a restoration to existing buildings. Further, when I participated in one of the competitions which spoke about designing a designing a community place for flood victims of Orissa, which comes very frequent than often. It was based on this concept about degrowth. And when I delved further into it, it spoke about cooperative movements of, when we, in architecture, when we use materials, we are supposed to design a building, choose materials, and know the construction process. And here, where we are speaking about how that material is coming from. Where do we know the source of that material? So from cradle to grave, what is the sustainability cycle for that material? Or be in fact, when Peter Victor, he speaks about a complete economical cycle, a closed loop economical cycle, wherein we talk about local economy and how economic growth can be durable and not just graphs, increasing graphs in. So basically, what it was actually giving this whole idea of what growth can be, and do we need to figure out, or do we need to change the way we perceive growth. And hence the indigenous degrowth terms uh, looks for solutions where is the quality of life, asking questions about life, or maybe cities as a massive opportunity for us to retrofit, or basically changing the way we live in the cities. It also talked about what about the well-being of the users that I spoke in the previous slide here, and it spoke about redistribution of income, higher taxes, important role of governments. So in general, degrowth was talking about the social factor, the economical factor, and the well-being factor at individual levels and also at community levels. So moving on, it speaks about how slow is beautiful, and our perceptions about growth are completely different and are contrasting to what we talk about as our own well-beings, wherein if we decide to provide for our needs collectively, we don't need to accumulate wealth. Next on, when this was a design competition, and further ahead, when I pursued after graduating from college, when I decided, when this question was intergrowing in my mind about getting the interior landscape into the building, I was really interested to actually go further ahead and explore the field of landscape architecture. And hence, I worked as a landscape designer in in an in a well-established office in the city of Gurgaon, and that's where I drew digital plans and sections. These were the projects which were for elaborate design projects, where each of these trees and elements were designed to meticulously to the detail and with dimensions, and as architects are uh, very specific about how the design should be and how the measurement and all of these elements, how do they fall into process, because there's a lengthy process uh, that I just shared about, from a client brief to actual final design and getting it constructed. So these were the drawings which I used to show, which I used to work on in my landscape architecture office as presentations, and then finally getting these drawings into the construction phase. So there was this, so I learned designing, then I actually got into how these designs can be converted or constructed on the land. While I was doing these projects, and I loved the way they were designed and the creativity was used, I still felt a missing part of being of being of being not able to experience nature while I was actually working as a landscape designer. I did not know how to plant a tree, and that's what made a complete different took a complete different change from what I was doing. And it was, my mind was brimming with questions of about how I should take use my architectural skills to permaculture design. Now permaculture is just a conjunction of two words, permanent and culture. And while I was also researching about degrowth, the word indigenous really stuck with me, because then I saw a lot of answers to my questions in village like communities, where we have our each place has its own unique wisdom and its unique practices which are very contextual to its location. And that's exactly what makes the design permanent. So the question about how I can use my architecture skills to permaculture design made me quit my landscape designer job and land in Aranya Farm in Hyderabad, Telangana, which is an 11.5-acre permaculture farm. And that's where, for the first time, I experienced, I closely observed what life was or life is. Previous to this, I was planting trees on computers. I was happy doing all the projects and getting involved in the design process, but there was this missing element, and coming to this place made me a complete person, where taking a stroll besides the water would take in all the pressures of not not succumbing to any pressures of the conditioning of the society that we live in, which also harms in kind of this creativity or the individuality of a person. And then take occasionally taking a dive into the river, which extended until the eyes could see under the blue sky. And then this is when I was in a nursery and we were planting trees, working hard as volunteers. And this is where I exactly saw myself working with nature. So I was a volunteer in 2017, where my mentor Nasana Kopula, he guided me and different people who came from 66 different countries, belonging to different backgrounds, culturally, by language, and teaching styles. And it was a complete explosion of who I was. So, and then a teacher, I became a permaculture teacher in 2018, um, and then a designer in 2019. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce what permaculture is. And yeah, so permaculture has a strong sense of shared work towards evolving sustainable, ethical, and viable systems for the only planet we have, which bases its foundation on observing powerful living systems and biological processes that govern and dominate on this planet, affecting all life forms and their survival. And this is what we are exactly experiencing today, where permaculture has an approach of problem is the solution and cooperation over competition, where we can we can clearly understand what exactly are our needs and wants, and how we can meet those with cooperation and treating problem as the solution. Well, the first foremost law that strikes with permaculture is the law of return, that whatever, it's basically learning from the plants and the trees and the forest systems that we have on our planet, that whatever plants take from the soil must be returned in order for future generation of those plants to live there. So basically, when plants are taking up the soil, they decompose, get back into the soil, and they nurture for future plants to grow in. Whatever we as gardeners or earth stewards or architects or coming from different backgrounds take from the land, we must return in order from our planet to remain healthy in the long term. So the idea behind permaculture is simple: take care of the earth, and the earth will take care of you. It bases itself on three ethics: earth care, fair share, and people care, where it is a philosophy in practice to agriculture and community design based solutions, where individuals use the correct elements for their own sustainability and support for one another. The term permaculture was coined by an Australian researcher, author, and scientist, Bill Mollison, and his companion, David Holmgren. Permaculture has these 12 guidelines as principles which are derived from constant observation and creativity to develop the design process. Let's start from the first. It says creatively use and respond to change. It also refers, here's a butterfly, which shows the butterfly effect, that even a flutter of a butterfly can change or can have repercussions in the way we all evolve. So creatively use and respond to change is being flexible, is to follow the design process and still be flexible to evolve. The second is observe and interact, and the most important principle, if as a permaculture practitioner, is to observe. Nature has answers to almost all the problems that we can seek them as solutions. And if we observe the nature well enough, the way the systems work, the life processes are governed, and if we can learn from them and interact with creating a design of our own, makes more relevance to the whole process. Then third, it talks about catch and store energy. It is about using renewable resources and renewable energy, the free energy from the sun, the wind. Fourth is about obtaining a yield. In permaculture, simple logic is about being efficient, and how an input should be equivalent to output, and that's how you a minimum effort can give the maximum output, and that's how you obtain a yield. Basically, we're speaking in reference to nature, but this can be applied to any form of design that we want to do, be it architecture, be it any other creative process that we are involved. And in fact, as a person, we can apply this to ourselves as well, and apply self regulation and accept feedback, because when we observe from nature and interact, uh, there's when we actually take these principles into action, we always get a feedback, be it positive or negative. And at the same time, it also asks us about trusting the design process and doing your bit of the action from an evolved design, and then let the design give its own feedback. Sixth is about use and value renewable resources and services, and it basically also talks about how we can use the materials of our daily lives, starting from the common example of a plastic water bottle to creating to collecting biomass for our soil, or biomass is basically just leaf and litter that falls off the trees, and that can be given back to the soil, which further nurtures the soil. And then it so hence producing seventh is about producing no waste, where it talks about defining what waste can be. Everything that we use can be using it to the maximum possible uh, way in it, so developing our own creativity and treat and understanding what waste exactly is. So even the leaf and litter that we are collecting is not a waste. Mostly in general practices, we just collect them, or either people burn them, or just keep it aside. If we, but in general terms, it's a change of the perception of what waste can be, and further design from patterns to details. This one being the most interesting one, because there are patterns to nature everywhere that we go around. The clothes that we are wearing in have patterns of their own. The walls that we have, it has patterns of its own. The nature has its metaphorical patterns of its own. Everything has a pattern and a rhythm. And if we observe and interact, and if we can creatively use them to in our design process, then a completely evolved design comes out. Ninth is about integrating rather than segregating, which talks about in being inclusive of all the all the positives as well as negatives, and how how you're also perceiving what a negative is. Maybe it just that for a particular design it's not working. It may be for the next design that's the most important um, element. So e- evaluating, seeing things as they are, and making the best use of them where it is possible. The 10th is use small and slow solutions. This is when we actually go for implementation of our design process, where using small and slow solutions helps us to get feedbacks, and then we can develop the system in a more sustainable way. 11th point talks about use and value diversity, where each of the element in the design um, has its own purpose and has its own value, and we should respect it. 12th is about using edges and valuing the marginal. Here, the principles might seem a repetition, but they have their own specific meaning, and they often overlap with each other and combine in two or three, maybe creatively use and respond to change. Uh, Goes with integrate rather than segregate in your situation. For somebody else, using edges and valuing the marginal and using and value renewable resources works for their own design process. So that's what permaculture is about. It talks, it's an approach of a design process rather than the process itself. It's about the perception of what we think is positive or negative, and how we can see the way nature nature has it, the way nature has created. The design process in permaculture is basically about universal wisdom, where it is completely intuitive, formless to form, user-friendly, understanding the risks, perspective of imagination. It it is designed. Permaculture is always designed to add value to the system. It's an informed process. Here, with permaculture, the whole system design thinking approach is what works the best, wherein the first thing that we do is about understanding the whole system, basically the context. That's what we also do in architecture. But here, what we are trying to determine is to apply all the principles that we can while in the design process, the first being observing and interacting. And for that, seeing the whole system as a complete identity and understanding its context with a it's it's not a it's not just a two-dimensional representation or two-dimension approach, but it's a multi-dimensional approach to a single problem. Where if this is what we're trying to understand the whole system, and after observing, we would have a proposed system solution wherein there was a complex matrix when we try to understand the whole system. And in this, out of this small matrix, there's this small place where we would where we would intervene. This is called observing the weakest link. And so impact making action happen in the weakest link to have the maximum output. And that is what efficiency is about, to minimize your effort and let the design evolve on its own. Where in the proposed system solution, if you take in this matrix and intervene into this smaller portion of this complex matrix, you would have a design system that evolves on its own, just like our cell systems in our body. So, with this, applying you small and slow solutions, the design would give us feedback about if there was a gain of in the design or there was a loss, and learning from it. So accepting feedback and self regulation, also in terms of time, energy, and money. So this is what we learned here, that least effort for the greatest impact, to give design a feedback on its own. And further, when we evaluate this process as a whole, based basing ourselves on ethics and guiding us in the right directions for the principles. With this, there comes a set of testing questions. The first is root cause. Root cause is actually finding out the problem, and this can be done only by clearly observing and understanding what the problem is. Second, um, making an effort and action into the weak link so that we can lift the whole as a part. Progress is about taking the action into a further ahead movement and see what profits we are having in terms of yield, in terms of income, in terms of social gain, and many other. The fifth being source to sink, that observing our consumption patterns. I think this is the most important testing question, to understand where our resources are coming from, where our materials are coming from, and if that material is harming, or the production of that material is harming our natural resources, harming our environment, or other naturally governed processes as well. And if there's also in social dynamics, if you understand, if that's also harnessing uh, energy from the people, as in form of cheap labor, or in or being made to work hard for a very minimum income, is also something that we as conscious consumers need to understand as well. Further, future resource base, uh, for having a long term vision of, if we'll be able to design, or if we'll be able to take this process further, what are our resource bases that we have to make the design work. So here is the whole thought process and the approach that we're talking, which are completely based on the ethics and principles for guiding us through the process. Seventh is about gut feeling. The most important, the second most important to look for the human intuition. We as humans are our brains, I would say, are very powerful devices, and it completely depends on us how we are making use of it and for what purpose and what are we how are we listening to our inner intuition of what is right and what is wrong, and how we see wrong and changing our perceptions as well. So talking about uh, permaculture and the design process, the next step is how do we evaluate this process? How do we know if this design system is working, and how is the process of getting a feedback from the whole design process? So here it we talk about land systems, wherein this is also something that we do as architecture students, creating different base maps for each of the information of the site to understand as a whole. While each of these factors is as important as all of these others for making an informed decision for the design, but each, they all of them overlap to actually give a solution to the whole procedure. So where the first we we if we have a land, be it for architecture purposes or farm design purposes or developing any kind of a center, be it learning or construction centers, we go ahead first with marking the axis. How are we approaching the land? Then what is the orientation of the land? Orientation being how it is placed with reference to the location of the sun. And the third is about climate. Where is this land located, and what are the climatic conditions um, that differ from place to place and regions? Then there's something called slope analysis. Slope is nothing but reading the surface of the land, and in permaculture, we need to read the surface of the land to understand what the land is trying to tell us about it. It gives the opportunity to for harvesting water, the most important and free resource that we get in the form of rain. Then visual analysis, where we as architects we also, design is not just about the complete base systems, but also it should be aesthetically sound as well. So how can we actually maximize the positives and the negative views, and what would we like to include in our design, and how we can keep them away if the views are deviated. The last being vegetation, where we mark all the existing vegetation on the land, and then a complete overlap of this system gives us an informed design. So these are the land systems we can design, and scale of permanence is something that we can measure the design with, which talks about first climate, what's the climate is, what the landform is about, water, access and circulation, vegetation and wildlife, microclimate. Microclimate is it differs a lot from from the from the existence of environment that we are in. I mean, there's a tree, for example, just imagine yourself sitting in your home and coincided with four walls. you have a completely different climate. You need a fan, you need maybe light if it is dark. But when you go out, the climate is completely different. If you see a tree, you would like to go and rescue yourself from the harsh sun and take shade under it. And so basically, natural systems define the kind of microclimate we have. Then, talking about functional areas of what are the areas that we want to develop in the design, which are going to serve functions of the needs that we have. Then, building and infrastructure, soil fertility and management. There are three important factors in which are which are prevalent in permaculture design. It is water, soil, and plants. You harvest water, you regenerate soil, and we need to plant trees. So aesthetics and sense of place, all of these factors help us to measure on a scale of permanence of how we are reaching to a level of creating the design as a sustainable system. But permaculture also talks about social landscape, where it says that we are all connected globally, nationally, state, in our own regions of cities, towns, and villages, in our intentional community, household, and individual level. And it also talks about economical landscape, where financial, not just financial, but we as humans have our social, cultural, spiritual, living, intellectual, material, and experiential assets as well to have resources and exchange in forms of capital. By this, it means that for a person not so good with in monetary aspect, but has a social recognition and has a spiritual understanding, has a completely different economical landscape to himself or herself, while some other person might have good monetary conditions and has intellectual um, asset as his or her own personality. So this scale of permanence, talking about land systems, social systems, and economical landscape, gives us a tool to assess and evaluate how, if we are going in the right direction of designing a land. So in we have design strategies in permaculture, where first in we observe site of where exactly is that place located. So site observation and analysis, the location of the place with reference to the surroundings, and what could be the orientation with respect to the sun, what could be the wind direction, and what could be the wind speed as well. Because in landscape designing, we can actually create designs through landscape which can either help us to channelize wind if we want it, or either help us to deviate the wind if they are not desirable. So there are multiple factors, and we need to observe the site in a sequential order to be able to analyze it. The third is relative placement, wherein there's rain coming in and there's a roof, and the roof water is dripping down to the soil. And instead of this water carrying away the soil with it, we planted um, a small herb like mint, and it flourishes, doesn't let the water run off, and yeah, it makes a complete sense to relatively place our elements, with the mint also taking in the beautiful aroma inside the well, where structure being used for some another purpose. Then the third is multiple elements for each function, where the roof is being used for harnessing the solar energy. We have the same, this is just a home for chickens to uh, have our own produce of eggs, and to have our own system of poultry. Chickens are an amazing um, way of providing nutrients to your soil. So as we said, that waste is nothing but what we perceive it as, and when chickens, when they litter, their poop can actually be used as a nutrient, to mixing it with our soils, and can be used to regenerate our soil. So here is, so again, this relative placement is coming in use, where this one function is served by multiple elements, where we have a compost pile, where we're using this roof, and there's a sauna here, and chicken. So the idea behind is multiple elements for each function for its continuance. Then the design strategies, multiple functions for each element, wherein there's a forest system here, and we have cows, and cows not just for milk, but they are the most important living being next to a human on a farm. And with all the natural byproducts that we get from a cow, be it a cow dung or its urine, which is a very good fertilizers for growing our food, and use as creating compost to add it back to the soil. And so there are multiple functions for each element that serve in permaculture. Then using biological resources is about, if this is a crop field, and we need to understand that soil is not just that we stand on, but soil is a living system. It has its own set of system, just as a human body, where um, underneath our feet are hundreds and different types of living organisms that flourish and break down. These are the decomposers. If we go back to our childhood classes of environmental science, trying to understand if how the system of producers, consumers, and decomposers play their individual roles in our natural system. So these worms and microbes, these are the food for the birds, and birds, when in return, uh, once they have these insects are the food for the birds, and once the bird has its own food, it drops its litter, and mostly in the litter of this bird, it the litter of the bird carries a lot of seeds, or lot seeds of trees or plants, that it just takes in the nutrition, and the major portion of the life giving part of a seed is what is left behind. So when a when a bird drops a seed into its litter, it goes back to flourish into a tree. So this is what I we need to understand, how our biological resources work, and how we observe from nature and create systems for a continued scale of sustainability. Then the third one is recycling energy and nutrients, where the water that is coming off from these high hillocks and these undulations in the surface of the land, here, if we do a minimal intervention of digging some soil here, and creating a mound of soil onto the direction of slope, we can collect or we can actually harvest the rainwater and let it infiltrate into our soil, which can actually increase the groundwater tables of our land. and each drop of water is an is is as valuable to a land um, as water is to humans. And making use or making recycling energy and nutrients in form of uh, water is the first basic step for any permaculture design. Whereas also with the flowing water that comes in, it also brings in a lot of biomass, a lot of leaf and lot of other decomposing material, and it settles down into this little ditch, wherein it again creates a microclimate of its own, and then also eventually with time regenerates the soil. Here, when we're talking about mimicking natural succession, is that the basic understanding that nature has its own process and it is slow because it is tending towards permanence. So when we talk about natural succession and mimicking them, it first talks about that there's just a hillock and grasslands in, and when we actually take the action of planting trees, it eventually over the period of time grows into big natural forests, and with it it also brings in other different kinds of life forms that we see around us. It also talks about maximizing diversity because diversity is a sure solution to increasing our resilience in terms of our food security as well. Because if for a farmer, when he grows our food, he grows it for the today's prevalent practices. Any person um, who grows his food, they have experienced the, just a minute. Yeah. So for maximizing diversity, if we have multiple plant species, we can ensure that we have resilience and security of all of the produce, and we won't be having issue of hunger, or in for that matter would for there were times Earth has had, and different regions of the planet have had their share of floods, droughts, and times before as well, the situations like pandemic has has occurred before as well. So what we need to understand is maximizing the diversity, be it in our food, be it in the in our crop systems, the way we have our own fruits and vegetables, also maximizing it with our diets that we intake. It all brings in a complete life cycle of from an individual level to national and to a global level. So maximizing diversity is the key point for having resilience. And stacking in space and time is about that if there's a big tree growing here which has a big canopy, and it might take another 10 years to grow, we can have something as a small shrub or an understory tree which grows only to a certain height and wouldn't hamper the growth of the main canopy tree. And then further ahead, we can cover the ground with uh, herbs and shrubs and miniature size plants. So basically, this is if what we are trying to understand, that the pattern of nature, that it stacks itself in space and time. And the reason we should not keep the soil bare or naked is because soil has a direct impact from from the sun, the sun takes in the complete moisture, whatever moisture that we need for plants to grow, and wind takes away wind and its speed blows away the soil, and it takes it takes more than 100 years for nature to build 1 inch of soil. So it's really important that we make efforts not to lose this top layer or the top soil that we call, and instead make efforts to regenerate our soils as well. So when talking about all the design strategies and processes, I um, the question about architectural, how I can use my architectural skills to designing a permaculture system, is when I documented a map of the Aranya Permaculture Farm, which is in Hyderabad. And there are, if you can, no, if you can zoom in, but let me try. Yeah, if we can zoom in, yeah. So that is the main entrance that you enter to the farm. There are multiple elements which are used in be the kitchen. There is a main structural house which is used as the infrastructure base, and then there are support systems which are the classrooms. There's the water resources. Then there's um, a biogas system, and there's a house for there's a cow shed, and there is a goat house, and there are different. So basically this farm, or for that matter, permaculture for farm design involves uh, humans, animals, and eventually when we have trees, there are birds as well. So birds are the most important factor for taking in the seeds further ahead in time, and that's how that's how we can relate ourselves to the history of evolution of the timeline of Earth, where humans have taken a very small part of what we see today, but there's a complete uh, evolution, and birds are the ones which have been most resilient in forms of evolving themselves, and as we see them today. So in this farm we have, if you closely look, there are zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5. So basically these are the zones which are divided, which divide the land into specific functions. Like the first zone here, which is marked by this boundary, is the place which is visited frequently and needs most of the attention of the custodian or of the client who wants to live on that land, or any caretaker who is taking care of the land. The second being zone 2, where we have a nursery of growing plants and vegetable gardens and small little a little bit of aesthetic in use of space and time as well. The third being majorly the crop fields, where most of the crops that we use as cereals, pulses, legumes, and other systems can be grown here. And there are multiple system of making compost piles of so compost piles are nothing but anything that is biodegradable and can go back to the soil, is making a heap of those materials, and with time, 2 or 3 months, it completely breaks down, and then we can actually apply it back as nutrients to our soil. Well, then there's zone 4, which is the most interesting part. It's about fruit orchard or a more evolved word would be food forest, where growing food forest uh, is to have your own set of fruits that grow in your own region. Um, and here we grew mango, sapota, guavas, banana, and many other. And then zone 5 is something that you keep based on the principle of ethics, that not only you take care of earth, take care of people, but also give a fair share. And by fair share, it also means supporting other life forms. So this is just a zone where you are there are mostly native tree species that are growing, and which can support the biodiversity and host biodiversity in the farm systems. So that was about how there are different kind of zones pertaining to different needs in a permaculture farm design system. And here again, there was this map is about a permaculture convergence that was held in 2017, and that's what I volunteered for. I lived on this farm for almost 7 months, designing and living through experiences of developing infrastructure and growing food and fodder crops. And since we all know, there are different kinds of elements that we these are all the elements that were designed pertaining to the need of this land to be used as the venue for the International Permaculture Convergence, which was held in 2017. So these maps kind of give us the idea of how permaculture can be scalable and completely subjective. And both of these are based on ethics and principles, because that's where we base take ourselves back to if there are any further questions about if you're going right in the direction of the design process. There were a few other maps as well. This is just the map of Aranya is 11.5 acres. This one is for 20 acres. This one is just a quarter an acre, one fourth of an acre, and it had a house for a caretaker. Um, we grew vegetables in these beds. There is a pathway which is leading to furthermore vegetable and fruit plantations, raised beds. So basically, then permaculture, the understanding is about it is scalable and can be applied in any situation, be it ranging from your balcony to growing food in a small pot, or having a land, or designing any kind of architectural any kind of system that might involve architecture skills as well. So um, these are mostly the kind of this is the kind of work I did as a designer, as a permaculture designer. And further ahead, when I was so basically it was a it was a way of finding alternatives to what the current situation of our society or current situation of our cultures offer us, and finding alternatives in terms of education, in terms of being around with people from all ages and learning from them. And this is one experience where I actually learned how to use colors, the, use watercolors to just as a break open my mind of making a creative evolve to creatively evolve through the notion of not being able to use watercolors for a longer for longer That's what I had as memory of it as a child, that I was not good with drawings, and all of these uh, maps that I drew were in softwares, and it took a lot of time and effort to do these as a professional. But with visiting with my with travel experience of visiting the open learning centers and finding the alternative education systems, uh, I met a diverse background where there were adults, kids, and youngsters learning and collaborating together to uh, to have a complete community living experience and sharing their resources and their knowledge with each other. That's when the shift from AutoCAD plans to a more hand-drawn um, sketches, which helped me to evolve in the design process, where all of these structures, I had a mind map of these elements, and it became an easier process to take these maps and actually go on to the site and get the design implemented and come into the action phase. Because what we're talking about is how to think, but the major step is to act upon what our thought process is about. And these designs were a good start for me to understand and have a better connection with the design and translating it onto the land. And that's another example of some hand drawn sketches which I was very inhibitive of drawing before my experience with the kids. And then uh, as a journey ahead, I realized that there the needs there is a question of how I can use this experience to do my little bit of contribution towards the environment that we live in. So I kind of was looking for how I can take this experience as an individual and extend it to the environment, and keep learning and co-learning with people, meeting different people, and bringing in their knowledge from different kind of background. And I was looking for a solution which involved multidisciplinary approaches to a specific problem. Then the problem didn't seem a problem anymore, because every person would have a specific and subjective solution uh, to it, because then the base was about following the ethics and basing ourselves on the principles. So, how can I use all of this experience towards contributing for the environment that we live in? And that's when this journey of questions with all of these waves of change from architecture to permaculture, experiencing a farm and experiencing how actually seeing it, how our food is grown, and what is the complete cycle, and how the farmers have their own rhythm of growing food according to a season, which actually gives a direction to us consuming it, us consuming our own diet in terms of seasonal fruits and vegetables. So there were a uh, multiple set of complex information that was being processed in my mind about the whole system, whole system, uh, thinking the whole system as a design, which made me look. So the design process is all about zooming in and zooming out. How do you see it as as a from a part to whole, and whole to part, and what what kind of a informed decision do we need to make. If so, there needs to be a bigger picture and there needs to be details. For example, if I speak about this part, it this is a complete bigger picture of how permaculture farm can be developed. But at the same time, each of these zones has its own purpose and a meaning, and it has these zones are has its own design elements which then serve to all the animal and human systems that we have on the farm. So so basically, zooming in is to work on the details of a design, and then zooming out would make uh, again help us to look at a bigger picture. So when I see the journey starting from being an architecture student to permaculture designer, I also realized as an individual that I need to balance myself um, in terms of energy, time, and money, with given to different timelines that we are in our own lives, and how these waves of change, that is the most obvious nature of uh, obvious nature of our environment, and how this questioning mindset helps us to evolve through all of these waves of change that come across. And that's when coming to a conclusion that one element serving many functions is just an example that this street needs a pump to take up storm water, an air conditioner to improve the climate, a device to capture carbon dioxide produced by all the air conditioner, a dust catcher and air filter to purify the air and improve the air quality, a shade from UV radiation, having temporary structures, wild invite birds and different biodiverse animals into our system, something to decorate it with, low maintenance that requires very less maintenance, and the last is this tree needs trees. This tree needs trees because it does pump water to its root system and takes it down underneath the soil. It provides us shade and cool air. It captures all the carbon dioxide and gives us oxygen to breathe. It's a dust catcher as well and purifies the air. It gives us shade. It it is a home for birds and animals. It it looks beautiful, and yes, it is low maintenance for sure. This example of one element, many functions is the key to designing any system through practice of permaculture. And with this, I would like to conclude that all of this was about thought process and what approach we can use uh, to evolve through a system, taking inspiration from nature. And now, going back to the basics, that we need to harvest water, we need to save our seeds, and we need to plant diverse trees in order to learn and be nurtured from the environment. Thank you. I think I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Apurva. Thank you so much for these illustrative images that really help to look forward in our life of architecture. Rightly said, you have explained it quite in a broader way how architecture could how what architecture is. I mean, if we call it in call the Hindi word of architecture, it is Vastu Kala. So Kala is an art. So Vastu Kala is an art of placemaking. That is what I understand architecture means. But nowadays people have started. I mean, from the generations, the essence of architecture has changed a lot. They what do they do? They believe the construction of buildings or construction of the urban areas is only the architecture is. But if we look into our historic essence and historic pictures and or historic text, architecture, what it believes, it contains a connection with nature. So they understand the nature and what the give and take relationship between a human being and a nature should be. They have understood it, and they have cultured their houses, their temples, or their farms in that ways. So there was a connection in olden ages, but gradually becoming the I mean adopting Western outfits and Western things in our Indian context. So we gradually, I think, not to say, but we have ruined our that essence of life, I guess. So if you look into the history, we have Rishi Munis over there. Were there, they were used to practice yogas, and nowadays we are I mean we are selling our yoga to those people. So that things were not to sell, that things were for to understand how we have to get connected with nature, we have to go in a flow with the nature. So that's what I jot down from your one of the slide. In the first slide, you have shown that you were confused between how you are connecting your architecture with nature. So you found a building. You only found buildings around you, but where is that nature around you? You were questioning that, and after that, your whole process of finding the nature and finding your connection with the nature, nicely jot down all the slides and your work. I hope all of our participants are getting benefited with it. And yeah, of course, many of people have appreciated your illustration and your presentation. As you said, you were not a good sketch maker previously, but but after you collaborated with many people and you learned it very nicely, and it was a great presentation. It was good images I can see over here. One question I need to ask you:
Hmm.
how you think that nowadays education in architecture has become very reluctant and very, I mean, it binds the people, the student, the architect, the education that we have in our schools and the education of planning also, it binds our student. There are not much books on it. There are not much researches on it, and they are just recurring and reinventing the old books only, not old books, but the recent books only. So, likewise, we learn about Meke. So, Meke is the book I would like to tell everyone. Meke is the book where we find bricks and the joinery details of the standard joinery details. But those things are we are using it again and again, but we are not finding anything different or anything that could be that can be researched on. So the Archiloop India initiative is a platform where we gather such kind of talents and such kind of people who are doing extremely well and extremely different from the conventional way of architecture. So I thank you, Apurva. Thank you so much. One question I would like to ask you: how you believe that student of architecture can actually or planning can actually introduce their connection with nature, how they should what should be their approach to connect with the nature and inculcate those observations in their actual practice, yeah, in school and in professional ways as well. So what should be their what should be the process that I would like to know from you.
Well, I'll try to answer with that question that if we remember, we had something called biomimicry, which we actually see it from just by textbooks. But if we change a little bit of approach of teaching that subject to the students, and it's not just as students that we need to evolve, but also as teaching teachers who also are a part of a learning system with the students. So it breaks that preconceived notion of just reading it from textbooks, but actually going out in the outdoors and learning. And the best way we learn is with our hands, is when we touch the soil, when we plant a tree or hold a seed, and that's when the curiosity of our mind starts working, of what could this be, or how is what just to imagine that this simple seed is going to turn into a huge big tree, and then further going to give shelter to other life forms. It's that whole awe and wonder about observing the nature. And then even um, that, that really is interesting to observe, and we can actually replicate design system, which will it's in my volunteering, I learned that nature does not have straight lines. It has curved lines,
Right.
and that's how mostly. And as you mentioned in the books, Mackay and DKJ and all of these, learning from what a point would mean for an architect, what a line would mean and an architect. So this basic notion itself, when you observe the nature and see how the systems are working, uh, if we give that enough freedom to ourselves to open our eyes and see, and then try to, so it's just not just a mere replication, but observing. For example, if we just have a leaf, and we observe that a leaf has its own veins, and that's how it distributes water into its system, and leaf is just another part of the whole big tree. So this so basically what we would, or mostly in students and architecture, is just observing nature, and then in terms of biomimicry we would draw a leaf. But the point here we missing are is observing and seeing how what function is that those veins doing on those leaves, and making use of that observation into designing is just a small change in the way we look, might help, I guess so.
Right, yeah. So observation level should be increased. I mean, the observation
Yeah.
levels, students and teachers as well. There's a question from Saurabh Naik. He's asking, could you please explain more about difference between Gangama Mandala and Banana Circle? And could you explain a few more such elements?
Okay. Uh, Ganga Matla, basically it's a system of I think I should get back to the slide to have a better understanding. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Here in this portion, when we are seeing, uh, that's where the Gangama Mandala is. And mandala is something that it's an energy conscious design, where it mandala itself um, tells us about that it's circular in shape, and this circularity in shape helps us to concentrate energy, and equally distribute that energy throughout that shape. So that's the concept that is being used to translate this design form into land in the form of mandala, where mostly the mandala is one of those elements which is located closer to your uh, staying place on a farm, where you grow your vegetables, your small little herbs and spices that you might need, which exactly how old house systems were, that each of the houses had um, small mint leaves or curry leaves, or they had their own vegetables growing in a little bit patches around their vicinity, or in their gardens, or in their front gardens, how much of a space they had. So mandala is just in design design evolved into a energy conscious form, where we grow herbs and vegetables and daily use need. Whereas banana circle is a complete different system, where I'm not able to zoom it, but maybe I can try. So with banana system, mostly it's a gray water system, if we can say so. It is usually located on land where we have water collecting when we can see the land and we can see water being collected, and without, so how can we make use of that observation into creating something that can be beneficial for the soil, for harvesting water, and we can take yield out of it as well. So with banana circles, what you do is, zooming in would help. Yeah. So with banana circle, you harvest, you make use of the grey water system, and grey water I mean from the water that is a waste from kitchen, uh, from all the washing of vegetables and cooking purposes, and also from washing your utensils to clothes, and how you can reuse that water as your renewable source to to have an yield. So basically, that is more a water specific function. Banana circle and Gangama Mantla is more of a growing system. And there are multiple elements, and mostly as we integrate animals on the farm, there are uh, houses for animals. There's a cow shed, there are chicken coop wherein chickens live in. Then these all come into zone 1 of design, a little farther away from where the residence is, because it needs attention at a frequent level as well. And then further zones, as we go away, the elements are placed in a way that they needs less and less maintenance. So it depends on the need of attention and frequency to be visited.
All right. Uh, Thank you so much, Apurva. Any more questions from our participants? Uh, would like to I would like to ask you to please type in the chat box if you have any questions.
We have any questions from anyone, I would like to answer. You can ask about any any query that you would have.
Meanwhile, I would like to ask you a question, Apurva. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, uh, how you believe that permaculture and the landscape planning that we learn in the field of architecture and planning. So, how permaculture or a permaculturist can help students of landscape architecture, landscape planning?
uh, I
Because
mean,
as you have
um,
practiced as a you have practiced as a landscape architect also, and you are a permaculturist now, so you know the difference between both these two.
I mean, I would say that when we design a land, uh, or when we design a building, so, or when we design, and okay, so there are differences about when we design a building on a land, when we design a land itself, and then when we do designing in terms of landscape designing as the conventional system, and then here comes permaculture into picture. So here in this presentation, what I wanted to intend is just the way of approach of how we are looking at it. And at the same time, for example, even in architectural projects, even for design of buildings, we do mark contours to see how is the land, and at what contour, or at what point or surface of the land a construction can happen, a construction can't happen, and what is the waterlogging area and everything, and then we try to place our buildings and other elements. Similarly, in permaculture, what we do is we do make use of contours, but it's for the purpose of harvesting water and then growing, regenerating your soil and growing plants. So these are the three basic things that we always have in mind. So what I would say is, it's just the change in the approach, that in the way we are looking at it. Or for example, in land or a building design, we also look at the soil type. Or sometimes there are situations where the soil type is not well suited for construction, or the soil is not, doesn't support any kind of a heavy load on it. At the same, so in permaculture as well, there are different patches of soil onto the land, and knowing and observing them makes us easier if we can grow, if there are vegetables that can be grown, if there are crops, or it is suitable for growing fruits as fruit orchard, or it is a good location for constructing your structures. So it's that's what it's kind of a similar approach, but with a different outlook, keeping in mind our natural resources as well. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's one more question from Saurabh. He's asking what principles of permaculture principles can be used while construction of houses. While constructing houses, what principles can we refer to? What principles of permaculture can we refer to?
Okay. What principle is about, first and foremost, being what kind of a material is being used to construct that structure, and where are we sourcing it from. So even if we are not using, or if it is not feasible for the kind of design that we have, that we are making, that it can't be made with natural materials, at least sourcing it from resources that are closer and available to us, and not getting it from something far beyond, because it is going to add up to the transportation, to other resources, which we did learn in architecture as well, that resourcing your material uh, from local resources would make the first major impact, because then the other elements would be completely cancelled out. At the same time, permaculture ethics would be, if the way we are construction is being done, if we are taking at least, or having a little concern about, starting to have a little concern about how we take care of the earth as well, and not letting just cement or other materials drying on the floor, and um, deteriorating the nature of the soil, or where further we can actually make use of it for designing our landscapes, or maybe just having an idea of how much do we need to use. And the whole point is about being flexible, of using and being creative about how we are using our resources. So when we speak, um, when you can actually take inspiration from design patterns in nature, and detail it and design it out to details, and maybe starting and seeing it what works, rather than seeing it as a first hand initiative of experimenting it on a smaller scale. And I think making a model of the design gives us a lot better idea of how we can approach through the design process, and having that flexibility to let the design evolve is actually what creatively use and respond to change is the first step. So you go into this, so basically it's a loop, and there are multiple factors that can count in for making an informed decision in terms of building design as well. Hello.
Okay, okay, yeah. Hello. Uh, you're not audible, Apurva.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Hello.
Now you are. Now you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one more question from Saurav again. He's asking,
Mm-hmm.
what should be the first activity to cultivate? I guess his question is, what is the first activity one does when a barren land is got aside? I mean, he tries to ask, I think, what should be the first activity to grow crops on a barren land, to rejuvenate that barren land. What should be the first activity one should carry out? Not
The
audible.
first
Yeah. Now.
activity for a barren land would be. Am I audible now?
Yes, 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 you are. Yes. You
Okay. For a to start with a barren land is a challenge in itself, and it first I would say is to go for making efforts to regenerate the soil. And for regeneration of soil, there are ways of adding your natural compost. You can bring in, or you can actually make your own compost and start regenerating the soil. Also, using the practice of mulching is just covering the soil with all the leaf and litter that we have around, keeps the soil hydrated enough to support any kind of production that we would want to have from that land. And yeah, the major first step would be soil regeneration. And there, to regenerate the soil, so basically soil has its own composition, and you can assess the health of a soil by looking at what kind of a which grow within a time span of just 2 months, and they help us fix nitrogen so that or on a consumption level, you can actually get the soil healthy to be for your product. Okay.
Yeah, I got the answer, and your
Yeah.
session was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Apurva.
Yeah,
Can we
sure.
take a couple of questions more? I think if anyone interested in asking some more questions, they can. Okay, no questions from anyone. All right. Thank you so much, Shapurva. I congratulate you on your success on
Thank you.
this permaculture and I mean the connect you have find out the connection between architecture and permaculture. Congratulate you for that, and thank you so much for being with Archilook India. And yeah, to all our audience and participants, I would like to share with you we have launched a YouTube channel of our Archilook India initiative. So I would request all of you to please subscribe it and like and give a thumbs up if you like our work. And yeah, soon we will be releasing all our previous webinars videos on that channel only. So make sure you like it, and please stay in the loop. We will be working with these kind of talents in our future also, and shortly we will be launching some more exciting events for you apart from webinars also. We will be carrying out some workshops and all. So please be with us, and you are our strength. You give us the pleasure to work on this architecture and to revive architecture and planning field. So please be with us, stay in the loop, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, Apurva. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.